Hey, everybody out there. I have been out of commission. No, not out of commission. I was actually out of town. I've been traveling overseas. I was in the U.S. for the last 5 or 6 weeks. 5 weeks. Phenomenal visit. Had a speaking tour that brought me to Virginia and Colorado. I was in New York and New Jersey and Maine. I was serving as a rabbi at a sleepaway camp there, which was awesome. While I continue with my full-time gig. So trying to juggle a few things, and I had not published an episode in just a few weeks. And so for those who were waiting, and thanks for those who messaged me, sorry I wasn't able to get to it, but hopefully it was worth the wait. I had certainly experienced some amazing things while I was traveling and meeting people from Jewish and non-Jewish communities, where I had the opportunity to engage with, speak with audiences, and did some of my own meditation and prayer and writing and thinking and also doing, and really strengthening and advancing and anchoring myself in the sort of approach that I have adopted over the last several years, I guess the last 25 years, always knowing it's there, but really putting it into practice as I've gone through my own sort of spiritual awakening and level of observances that I've gone in and out of, and rabbinical school and the like. This sort of approach to living consciously and being aware of all that is happening around us. So I want to start off this episode here at the Anchors of Hope with a question. What if the life you are chasing right now is just a placeholder? It's not the wrong life. It's not a mistake. It's just not the thing itself. It's not exactly what you have anticipated or have been looking for. And it maybe is a stand-in for something you already know or you already sense is there waiting for you, and you have yet to discover or identify. But if you listen closely, if you pay attention to what in Yiddish we call our kishke, literally it's our intestines, but really it's our intuition, our stomach, we know that there's something out there for us. We just don't always pay attention, which is part of our challenge. So I want us to stay with this notion for just a moment here. And I want to raise a Kabbalistic tradition, if you will, or an understanding of things. The understanding of God's name in Jewish mysticism or in Kabbalah, the Ein Sof, which literally means without end, but also is translated to the infinite. Right? There is no end. There's boundless sort of essence, or even that essence creates boundaries. Words create boundaries. So the notion that there is something that is beyond boundary, the Ein Sof, the never-ending, if you will, the what exists prior to anything that is relational, anything that exists before will, right? Choice, will, before even the possibility of anything, as I said, being described at all. It's the ground beneath everything that later becomes nameable, the infinite from which all potential flows. So here is what I want us to hear differently today. The Ein Sof, the infinite, the never-ending, is not only a theological boundary, something we reason about and then set aside or pray to or think about. It is an availability. It is available, a potential that is already reaching toward us constantly, whether we notice it or not. The question I want to pose is never whether the infinite is present. It's always present. The question is whether we are available to it. Are we available to the infinite potential that exists? And that word, availability, is going to carry us for the rest of this episode. So I want to touch on what stands in the way of availability, of living consciously, of being present to the infinite potential that surrounds us always. For most of us, it's not something dramatic. It's not even a single evil inclination we can name. and defeat it once. It's something quieter. It's something that we may be not even paying attention to. We fill our lives, you see, we fill our lives with things we believe are the purpose itself when they were only ever meant to be placeholders for it. It reminds me of a saying, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel of blessed memory, and I like to quote him, especially this quote. He said, "Things when magnified are forgeries of happiness or placeholders," as I mentioned earlier here. So it's a job, it's a home, it's a kind of home, it's a big home, it's a beautiful home, it's a luxurious home. It's a car we want, but we don't really need. It's being able to provide for the people we love. That is something that is important to do, but it also sometimes maybe it gets in the way to a certain extent. How much do we need to provide? It's groceries, of course, in the refrigerator. It's a day-to-day thing. It's a vacation we take. If we are fortunate to take a vacation, certainly one per year, if not more. And so I want to be precise here because it would be easy to hear this as a rejection of that life that we live, of the things that we need or want at times. And it's not, because that life does matter. Providing for our families is not beneath the spiritual life. It is certainly part of it. The Torah, the Bible, does not ask us to abandon the material world. It asks us to place it correctly, to make sense of it. And the placeholder problem is not that these things exist per se. It is that we quietly allow them. We let these things, these placeholders, become the destination instead of the journey or the road we take. Joy that depends on things, joy that depends on certain things, on material things, has a ceiling, right? We get the job, and that joy certainly lasts a season, maybe several years. You get the house, and the joy resets to whatever came before it. And this is not a flaw in us. It is simply what happens when joy is magnified by acquisition. As I said earlier, I mentioned Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel's quote. It can only ever be temporary because there is always a next thing. There's always the next thing we want to acquire. But there is a different kind of joy, one that is magnified not by what we have, but by who we are being while we have it. And here is the part I actually believe, the part that sounds almost too generous to be true. You do not have to choose between them. You can build the material life, provide, work, plan for the future, and still access the deeper joy underneath it. You are allowed to, certainly, in a sense, to have your cake and eat it. The two are not in competition. They only feel that way when we have mistaken one for the other, when we put greater weight and meaning to the things we have or the things we want. So how do we become available? How do we live a life that is conscious, that is aware, that is present to all that is happening around us, to the podcast episode we might be listening to, or to the people we meet on a daily basis? It certainly doesn't happen by waiting. Availability, living consciously, is not passivity dressed up in spiritual language. It is not sitting quietly and hoping the infinite eventually notices us. It is being an active participant. It is in participation. We are meant to be active in our own becoming, actively pursuing, manifesting our destiny, sensing, knowing that there is a greater force at work all around us, an energy that binds us to something larger than our own calculations, and choosing again and again to orient ourselves towards it. This is where knowing enters. This is where knowing that there is something far greater. This is where knowing that there is something far greater than ourselves, that we are part of something larger, this is when it comes in. Not knowing like knowing information or content. Knowing as a kind of alignment between what we do and who we actually are underneath the roles we play or the roles we perform. And there is a real difference between living a life and living a lie. A lie is not always a falsehood we speak out loud. Sometimes it is simply a life built entirely around what we think we are supposed to want, while some quieter, truer self waits underneath it, unconsulted, just waiting for its chance to be discovered. And when we live life from that authentic place, something shifts. Joy stops being something we acquire and becomes something we recognize. It was already available. It was always there. We were simply somewhere else, distracted by placeholders when it arrived. And this is the ascension that I want to name in this episode. Not leaving the material world behind, of course we live within it, but rising above the story that the material world is the whole of the story. Still working, still providing, still living the day-to-day life fully, still going on the vacation, still purchasing the things we need, of course, and what we want, but no longer mistaking it for the ceiling, if you will, for the ceiling of joy, of living authentically, of living our truest selves. There is a force working against this availability, and it is a loud and obnoxious voice. It is society, social norms. It is politics. It is the constant finger pointing, the arguments, the outrage cycle that resets every morning with a new target. In the language of our tradition, this has a name. It's called in Hebrew the yetzer hara, the evil inclination, the inclination towards distraction, towards what pulls us away from ourselves and for what is truly important in this life we live, in the gift and blessings we have received or have yet to receive, if we are available for revelation, to receive them. And I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to turn this into commentary on any sort of particular fight happening in the world right now, and that is not the point. It will age badly if I try, because there's always something going on. The noise is not evil because of its content per se. That's always going to be going on throughout history. It is evil because of what it captures. It takes attention that belongs to the ascended life and spends it on arguments that will be forgotten by the next season, while the actual work, the effort we take, the work of becoming available awaits us. And we end up wasting our time and energy and limited resources in areas that are undeserving of them. You know what this noise feels like, right? You scroll down that, social media post or whatever that leaves you more agitated than informed. The argument you rehearse in your head that changes nothing except your own peace. Well, I would reply. What would you reply? What would you say to that? Such a waste of our time. None of it is nothing. Exactly. But almost none of it is what our life is actually for. It doesn't help us in any which way. This is not only a private joy. This is something we quietly hoard for ourselves. And in our tradition of handing it off from generation to generation, every child inherits something from her or his or their parents or the adults around them. Whether we intend to hand it down or not, they inherit either the noise that we live within and allow to occupy our space, the anxious grip on placeholders or things that we deem to be important, the brief joy that has to be earned through acquisition, or they'll just inherit, perhaps, hopefully, if you do it right, they'll inherit the ascension, the modeled experience of a parent who is present, who is providing for and still reaching for something much larger than themselves, who is not blinded by what they own or what they buy or what they want. And we can experience this. We can experience this now in the present and transmit it forward at the same time to our future. Those are not two separate tasks. They are the same. They are the same one approach to living our lives, because what we do now in the present impacts our children, and our future, and what we pass forward. So before we close, I have two questions, and I want you to sit with them if you don't mind. Right now, if possible, or tomorrow, whatever works for you. Name one placeholder that you have mistakenly, or mistaken, if I will, mistaken for a destination. One thing that you believe that this is it, this is where you're headed. And then, and this might be harder, name one thing in your life that you would still keep, even if it stopped being the source of your joy. So, first question is, if you can name one placeholder that you have mistaken for your destination. And number two, if you can name one thing in your life you would still keep, even if it stopped being the source of your joy. You see, the Ein Sof doesn't necessarily need us. The infinite doesn't need us. It exists. The Ein Sof is not waiting anxiously for our attention. But our access to it depends entirely on what we clear out of the way, on the space we make, on the attention, on the availability, on living consciously, on being aware, being present in our lives as often as possible. And so the question is not whether the potential is there, it always is. The question is, who are we? Why are we? And like I like to pose in all of our episodes and on this show, what kind of ancestors will we be? What are we leaving for those who come after us? And why not live a life of purpose, being authentic, being honest with ourselves? The most meaningful life we can live for the limited time that we have on this earth. Sending everyone love and light from Israel. And my hope for all of us out there is to live a life of consciousness.